Give me a second. Let me get started. All right. So you know what question I'm probably going to ask, but I'm going to ask it anyways. Pilot, say what?
What?
Thank you guys for tuning in to the 4th episode of Pilots Say What, where we hear what pilots have to say. And you did meet Cole last week, but we wanted to bring him back one more time because he's on his way out from thrust flight. And I think he has some good things, some more insight that he can provide us. My name is Zachary. I am your host. I'm not a pilot, at least not yet. Maybe one day, who knows? But I'm excited to talk to Cole again. I am. Cole, you are on your way out from thrust flight, right?
Correct.
Why is that?
Well, I got into this with the aspirations of eventually becoming an airline pilot, as most people are coming into our school these days, and thankfully I was able to get all my hours in a pretty decent amount of time. And
Yeah. Do you
it's
know
time
about
to-
how long that took?
It was about, and I think I mentioned last week too, it was about a year to get the time that I needed from finishing ZTA and then
Okay.
becoming an instructor.
That's good. That's what I was wondering. But you're leaving because you did meet your aspirations, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how much you're allowed to say about that, but
Yeah, we hit the light at the end of the tunnel, and
Yeah.
at points, it seemed far away, but just kept my head down and stay focused, and eventually got there.
yeah, that makes sense. Are you allowed to say where you got a job? You got a job, right?
Yeah.
Just to be clear.
I'll just say
Okay.
I'm going to an American Eagle carrier,
Okay.
regional airline that serves the American Airlines brand.
Well, that's good to know that you did it as fast as you did. You started ZTA as you already had your private pilot license.
Correct.
And then you came in looking for your instrument and finishing the ZTA program. So how long did that part take before you became a CFI instructor? Or sorry, CFI.
That was about, I can kind of just walk you through the timeline. So
Yeah.
I started in June with instrument training, and I think that took me to about August. Or sorry, I don't remember the exact dates, but that was about most of the summer was instrument training. Then commercial took me into the fall. CFI I completed December of that year. Double I shortly thereafter in January, and then my multi-engine rating later in February. So it was about 9 months.
Yeah.
From start to finish. And I honestly think if we would have had the EOC examining ability at that time, that timeline maybe could have even been closer to like 7-8 months, something like that. Because I did spend some time waiting on check rides. That's just the nature of any school you go to. You're never going to get one the next day that you're ready for it. But yeah, so it was pretty good. It stacked up to everything I was expecting, and as it was advertised. And then was able to jump right into a job as well, which made the transition really seamless.
I know after talking to you last week and then talking to some of the students yesterday, I was out on campus, talking to everyone, doing a little bit of research. So I know what I'm talking about.
Resident expert.
Yeah, I'm getting there. But I didn't realize that you were in the program before we actually had that ability.
Yeah.
So, and yet you made it through that quickly. I think that's a feat. That was one of my questions, was to ask how long it took and if you thought you could have got through it a little bit quicker.
Yeah.
Because now we have, like you said, EOC. We call it examining authority. We're regulated by the FAA to be able to be a Part 141 school, which allows us to actually do that. So now you don't have to wait on the DPE. What are you familiar with how that kind of normally goes before? How long did you have to wait on the DPE?
Well, it ebbs and flows. Is weather a factor in delaying EOC or check rides and EOCs? What's examiner availability like over the holidays? When you're DPE, and you can set your own schedule, you're not really going to work on Christmas. That kind of thing. Yeah, me neither. So yeah, just kind of things like that go back and forth, and like, what is our current school's demand for check rides? Like, where do you fall in that line of people waiting?
Okay.
So it was kind of unpredictable, but like, yeah, for my CFI, that one I waited like a month and some change, and same thing for double I.
Just to be able to get, to be able to do the check ride, right?
Yeah.
Not check ride, but
yeah. So that was probably where maybe most time savings could have came from. Granted, I wasn't a perfect student, but I did pretty well through training. I was really focused and determined, and worked my butt off. So
yeah.
I think I made the best of what I could given the circumstances at the time.
What do you think helped you get through as fast as you did? I mean, do you think there's like a thing that, like, what's your probably your strength if this was a job interview?
Man, I don't know. That's a tough one. Like I was always a really determined individual, and especially in things where that I was passionate about
Mm.
and that I put a lot of effort into.
Hmm.
So when it came time to when I started flight training, I was like, oh, like this is my job now, and it just kind of came easy to me. And
Yeah.
like those long days of sitting at a desk reading regulations and stuff about aviation, that didn't feel like work to me. So
Nice.
it was a passion, but it was also work I had to do. But because I was passionate about it, I didn't really feel like work, so I was
Yeah.
willing to put in the time and everything like that. And also, I think one of the things that really helped me and um, things that give me a lot of tips as a flight instructor as well is I would just absorb content like
Hmm.
nobody's business.
And when
So
you say
like,
that, you mean like on YouTube and
yeah, YouTube, podcasts, different publications, like different. There's a lot of good books out there
hmm
on aviation as well, other than just the FAA publicized stuff.
yeah.
But like, so say for example, before I even got to thrust, here's an example. There's this YouTube series about instrument training on YouTube.
Hmm.
And when I'd go to the gym every day and walk on the treadmill for an hour, I'd be watching instrument training
Yeah.
videos. Or like when I'm going to bed, I'm watching a different YouTube creator where it's just watching him fly like an IFR flight in a private jet.
Yeah.
And while like, even if the content's not strictly educational
Uh-huh.
and you're just watching something that's for entertainment purposes, while the goal or focus may not be to teach you something,
Yeah.
you can still pick up things along the way
Right.
and gain exposure to all these different topics and stuff. I think that kind of gave me an edge. Like, I don't know, it's not really like formal studying, but if you
No, but I
watch
think that's the
hours and
thing.
hours and hours of content, you're gonna learn things and pick things up.
Absolutely. I think that like you are what you consume.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's how people say it, but that's what I wanted to say is
Yeah.
because I kind of adapted that for myself coming into this job. I'm like, okay, the same way that I did for videography, I
Mhm.
wanted to understand more. And I'm like, look, I'm just gonna literally watch it. I'll play it in the background when I'm cooking.
Yeah.
I'll listen to it. I don't care.
Yeah.
But it'll become second nature. I want to think about it all the time.
Yeah.
And I kind of want to apply that a little bit here, so I learn the
Yeah.
way that you are. But I think that's a good. I think that's
Yeah.
a good way to go about it.
It's almost like
Yeah.
a healthy,
Mhm.
maybe sometimes unhealthy obsession.
Ah,
But I feel like, if you're really going to devote yourself to something, especially when it's in such a fast track environment like this, like
yeah.
it's really got to be your end all be all and your only focus. And, you know, luckily enough in my position, I don't have a wife or kids or really a
Hmm.
family to look after and take care of. So
You're
it
able
was
to do
it
that.
was everything. It was my life was centered around this, and I was gonna do whatever I had to do to make it work.
I think I see that in people here, and maybe not the like exact living situation, right? But the
Yeah,
commitment level is like, hey, I mean, I'm here to do this,
yeah,
and you don't read books and watch videos while you're on the treadmill or before bed if you're not dedicated.
yeah,
And I think if we circle back around, I think your dedication sounds like it's probably your
yeah,
strongest strength or your
yeah,
strongest strong. What do you say? Where I think
uh,
that's your strength then,
yeah,
biggest strength. Well, that's good to hear. I wanted to follow up on that. I think you said something about oh, what then can I ask you if you critiqued yourself and in a way that might be valuable to someone else, what is something you think you could have done better to get maybe through the program a little
mm,
smoother or faster, whatever it may have been,
yeah. Um,
if you can think of anything.
Man, let's see.
Put you on the spot.
Yeah, and it's definitely tough for people to admit like when you're wrong or when you screwed up.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
I was never, and people have told me this, so this
Yeah.
is why I know. But I was never the best at taking criticism,
Mhm.
which is, it's a big part of training and something that's definitely essential to a flight training environment is
Right.
whether it be positive or negative. It's usually a part of a debrief that we do
Mhm.
with every flight. So I feel like probably I maybe could have been better at, taking those things and, really focusing on them and applying them to the next lessons and things like that.
Mhm.
Um, but
Seemed like you kinda you probably took it in anyways over
yeah.
time, and you said you got told that.
hmm
So, I mean, do you feel like you improved at that along the way?
Yeah, I feel like it for sure.
That's something you look out for.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm definitely more self-aware of it
Oh,
now,
okay,
you could
okay.
say too.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
to be, just kind of put myself in that place or mindset of, I'm here to learn, and
Mhm.
mistakes are going to happen. Because I think I maybe had this mindset too that every time I had to go out there, it had to be perfect and had to, ace
Mm.
everything. And if I didn't, it'd be really frustrating. Rather than understanding, it's just part of the journey.
That's a good way to think about it, because it's easy to take something almost like what personal
Yeah,
if you really
that's how
care
I would
about
see
it.
it too.
Yeah.
Because when it's enveloped in you and becomes like that healthy obsession,
Mhm.
that's my whole life and everything I am
Mhm.
as a person and like what I'm doing right now.
And you're
And so
telling
if
me.
I'm failing at that, like
Mhm.
that sucks.
Yeah, you took it like not good
Yeah.
news, but like you said, that sounds like a great way to flip the perspective. Hey, it's a
Yeah.
learning opportunity. I
Hmm.
see that way too. Like, what if I have a video that's just not turned out like I want, it doesn't do good, or someone has something to say about it? I'm like, man,
Yeah.
I just gotta make another video. Okay, well that's good. And then I'm not flowing there because I remember what are some things that. Oh, we're flowing right through 'em, man. That was a natural flow. Thank you. I think you just said a lot of good things.
Cool.
Well, so it's good to hear that you had a good efficient movement all the way through the program here at
Yeah.
ZTA at Thrust Flight. Some people were expressing that they were curious about what it looks like to start to transfer yourself from being a student to, hey, I'm gonna start my career now, maybe with a
Yeah.
major airline or wherever. I'm wondering, kind of like, at what point did you start realizing, oh, I really do need to start talking to these people, start
Yeah.
maybe filling out my resume, updating my picture.
Yeah.
How did you start that process?
Yeah. Um Man, and there's so many different ways you can
Hmm.
go with this. What was helpful, um, definitely, and I think I mentioned in the last episode as well, is Thrust would bring in regional carriers to come and talk to
Oh
us
yes.
as a student body and instructor body, to let us know about cadet programs and different opportunities that are out there.
Hmm.
So that kind of gets the ball rolling in your head. You're like, oh, should I maybe start worrying about that?
Yeah.
And it's always great to have a plan. In aviation, that plan can get derailed and
Hmm.
sidetracked in a million different ways. Um, but everyone's thinking of that ultimate goal of flying a wide body for American Delta United, whatever.
Right.
Um, but and coming from a business background as well, I thought I had a pretty decently polished resume, but a flying resume is like completely different.
I hear about that.
Yeah, they still want to hear about those other experiences you've had outside the cockpit
Hmm.
because believe it or not, you are more than just a pilot
Uh-huh.
in their eyes, and other people's as well.
Hmm.
So you still include some of that stuff, but it's more just focused on like your flight time, ratings, licenses, all that stuff.
Hmm. And
Um,
do you have to include some of those details in a way on a pilot resume differently than you would a regular one? Is it
yeah,
like under skills or
it's a
something?
little less detailed on like job specific things in like other industries. Like
Hmm.
I was a finance intern for a summer in college,
Hmm.
and so I put that in the company in the title or whatever. But you're not going to go into deep diving on your day to day job functions in that
Yeah.
perspective. I would say also instructors and other students, and just kind of like having a network of people around you kind of gains your exposure to
Mm.
um, what are the different milestones that are coming up, when can you start applying for this or
Right.
that, etc. And also from like watching and listening to a bunch of other creators and content talking about what opportunities are out there, what's the current state of the business
Mhm.
or aviation in general. Kind of a lot of things go into what opportunities are out there and um, what's available to you.
Mhm.
um, Coming through, I knew at the end of the day, if you wanted to fly for an airline, let's
Oh,
say
yeah.
specifically, kind of helps steer the conversation in a more direct path if we could just focus on that one.
Yeah.
Because charter pilot opportunities in Part 91 or 135 environments, those for the most part are kind of more driven on a network basis. Like you really
Yeah.
got to network your butt off to
And did
meet the
you do
right
that?
people. Um, Not necessarily.
Okay.
So I kind of had the goal in mind of, getting to an airline and climbing the ladder that way,
Uh-huh.
um, kind of through the system, you could say.
As you were saying. Yeah.
Um, and in my position as well, where, I am 21, which,
Mhm.
so for some of our students now that there's no longer a degree requirement, you're getting students that are 18, 19, 20 years old. they physically cannot go to a regional airline until they're 21.
Right.
So, but in my instance, I'm like, oh, okay, any day I'm not there, I'm just burning time.
Yeah.
That's kind of one of the things that drove me to stay and be an instructor for the full 1,500 hours is because, yes, while and like flying a jet, would be really cool. Don't
Yeah.
get me wrong. I've yet to actually do it in real life, but I'll let you
Mhm.
know how it goes.
Yeah, I'll be waiting. You'll come back around and visit us again.
Yeah. While that would be cool and fun for sure, and a whole new side of aviation to explore, a lot of times in those lower time jobs, you're not going to be building as much or as consistently building as much flight time
Mm.
as you would be as an instructor.
Mm.
Granted, that experience is invaluable having jet time, especially early, but at the end of the day, if the airlines are your goal, then that total time number is
Is the biggest thing,
is
right?
is the biggest thing as long as you have all the other prerequisites met.
Because there's different ways to step into the career, right? But
Yeah.
if you get a certain number of hours, and again, obviously, I'm not a pilot, so that's why I'm waiting. I'm gonna get some of these basic information out.
Yeah.
So if you're a CFI, you're
Mhm.
working as a pilot technically, right?
Yeah.
At that point already, but you're an instructor,
Mhm.
and before you can fly commercially or multi-engine in jets, you have to get a certain number of hours, right? Depending on what kind of job you get. Is that how that
Yeah,
works?
and a lot of things in the corporate world and for airlines,
Right.
it's insurance driven.
Mm-hmm.
And so like if you're a 500-hour pilot and that's all on a single engine piston airplane, and let's
Yeah.
say you have your multi-engine license or whatever, if you just got the bare minimum, you're not going to be able to be insured, especially
Mm-hmm.
as a pilot in command on a jet or something like that for a smaller aviation department.
So if you get 1,500 hours, I mean that's not just a requirement, but it's more so like
It's
something
also
that
another license.
yeah, it's another license, and you get a
Yeah.
ticket. You get the ticket to go kind of more where you want to go.
Yes, and so typically, that training, the airline transport pilot license,
Hmm.
that training is usually sponsored by your first employer.
Okay.
I was always told early on, don't pay for a type rating, don't pay um, for training that someone else will give you at their expense,
Hmm.
which is saying like, don't go get a Gulfstream type rating, and then there are people that do that. There are people that will go get licensed to fly one of those jets and then work as a contractor,
Uh-huh.
which is a whole another side of the business. And those guys can do pretty well too.
Yeah.
Those guys get paid like it's like $2,000 a day.
Right, but then they had to pay for that
Yeah,
out of
which is
pocket,
like
right? With no.
$50,000, something crazy.
Yeah.
But yes, so the airline I'm going to work for, they sponsored my airline transport pilot training, and they're the ones that will ultimately put me through the rest of the training and give me that license as
Nice.
well.
Nice.
So yeah, it was. I actually have family in the industry, not on the airline side,
Yeah.
more on just the parts and whole asset valuation and management
Mm.
that goes into that. Um, and they knew all these contacts at airlines, and it was almost frustrating at times because I never wanted to turn down any of these opportunities to network, but
Right.
you know as if I'm a student pilot or don't even have all my licenses yet, the CEO even if I knew Ed Bastian, the CEO at Delta, he can't do anything for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
You have to there's these hard stops in place, as specifically for the airlines even more
Hmm.
so, where if you don't have this, like, you know
Yeah.
can't do anything.
So you covered your how do I say that without actually I was about to say the wrong thing. You did everything you needed to do to make sure that nothing was going to stop you and you could take the next step. But you got your private before you came to Thrustlight, and then you instrument through CFII here,
And multi.
and then multi, yeah, and now you've been an instructor the whole time. And then what is the word EOC? That's what allows you to pass people on their check rides.
Yeah, so the technical term for it is a check instructor.
Check instructor. Okay.
Some people will say check airman, but it's not technically a check airman because
Mm-hmm.
that's like the airline equivalent.
Mm-hmm.
But so that's what it's. You have to be on this letter of authorization from the FAA.
Mm-hmm.
That says you're signed off to do this for a 141 school,
Right.
and then from there that will allow you to do stage checks where you have to observe and watch all these, and then same thing if they want to make you an EOC examiner as well.
Oh, okay, okay, I see what you're saying. And then, uh, about how many hours did you have before you started doing, interviews or applying to jobs?
Yeah, and yeah, that was something I really forgot to dig into earlier.
Mhm.
But so, um, it varied. In my situation too is going to be completely different
Yeah.
than some people's. Like, and I could comment on what I think I would do if I was in those situations, but
Yeah.
you know, I never really would know unless I'm in those shoes.
Right.
But so I once I became an instructor and started working, I was like, okay, what can I do now to be as proactive as possible? Because like I mentioned, all these airlines, they have cadet programs that some carry more benefits with them than others.
Mhm.
A lot of where what airline you want to go to, it can depend on like the regional you go to. You may decide to go there based on a major airline that you want to go to with a flow through program, or even stepping outside of a flow to
Mhm.
go somewhere else. But a lot of times in aviation, where you live or what airline you work for, those two things kind of
Mhm.
coalesce.
Mhm.
Uh, People can and do and will commute from airports or places where their airline is not based, and they'll
Mhm.
fly to where they got to go to work, get on
Yeah.
it, and then start their trip from there. But I've heard all sorts of horror stories about commuting and
Yeah.
essentially adding like another half day to a day to your already say 4 day trip that you were on.
Mhm.
And I just decided for myself, yeah, that's something I don't
Okay,
really
I
need to
see.
try my hat at.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
but I was luckily the timing worked out, and that's a huge thing too with airline hiring is
Mhm.
timing and luck.
Yeah.
Um, and so like my lease here in Dallas will be up the next month too. So I was pretty free to, I'm gonna move wherever I get based.
Yeah.
But that's the other thing too. I don't really know where I want to live.
Yeah,
So
right? How do you
I was kind of an open
Yeah.
book on that regard.
Mhm.
I was kind of open to any opportunities. But some airlines are more renowned for their training. Others are, maybe a better pick because they have one of those flow through agreements or something like
Yeah, I
that.
see what you're saying.
Um,
Mhm.
if some people may take, there's ludicrous bonuses out there now for some airlines for like direct entry captains and stuff, and
Mhm.
um, if it was some amount of money like that,
It's hard enough. Yeah, it's
yeah.
kinda like, "Oh, well."
But yeah, so what I did is I looked at these cadet programs, and
Mhm.
I was the first one. That one was great. I also had another one with a ultra low cost carrier,
Mhm.
who you may have seen in the news is no longer hiring and now is actually furloughing pilots.
Oh, wow.
And so I'm looking at that one, and is that going to happen? Probably
Right.
not.
Yeah.
It would have been really cool in order to go fly, a big jet like an Airbus or something like that, or a
Yeah.
737 right out of being a CFI. But what I was cautioned with that too was just kind of the state of their business, and it is a lot bigger jump to not go from CFI to regional jet versus like CFI to you know bigger Airbus or
Mhm.
737. The training step up can be, or learning curve can be, a lot steeper in that
Yeah.
regard. Um,
And you should still have opportunities to move around
yeah,
as time goes on. I mean,
yeah,
as you chose this as a career, right? So you got a little
yeah.
time. So, um
But then I ultimately came to applying and accepting a job for the airline I'm at. And with that one too, was one that also offered bonuses and things like that.
Mhm.
And I neglected to go the route outside of that track to where, if something did happen or plans change, or, something drastic happens in the industry, you could kind of pivot,
Yeah.
um, and just be flexible in that regard.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah.
No, that makes sense. Yeah, okay. I don't know if you were gonna say how much, like around what time you started applying in reference
Yeah.
to how many hours you had. Do you wait until you get your 1,500 hours?
No,
Oh, but you started
do
doing
not.
that yeah, exactly. You don't do that. You started doing, what did you call it? The program?
Yeah, I got in
Yeah.
my first cadet program
Okay, cadet
as
program.
soon as I became a flight instructor and only had 300 hours.
Okay.
Um, so and a lot of cadet programs are like that too. Though some may even interview when you're still a student in flight school.
Mhm.
Airlines are constantly signing and agreeing on new partnerships with flight schools. So depending on where you're at, I would just look to where you want to go and
Mhm.
see if they have a relationship with the school. If not, what else can you do to get your foot in the door?
Gotcha. And
Um,
that's what the cadet program helped with a
yeah,
little bit.
and typically, um, you don't want to wait till 1,500 hours to start figuring this stuff out,
Mhm.
because just with the specific airline that I'm going to now, it's been a process of a couple months to go through the preliminary ATP training, the time it takes to get an interview,
Mhm.
get that scheduled. Then we got to submit all this paperwork. That takes a while. Get a class date,
Mhm.
and then these things don't happen overnight. And
Right.
so
So
if you
start
wait till the
prepping.
very end, you're gonna find it's taking a lot longer than necessary.
That makes
And
sense.
a lot of airlines too, like, have somewhat reduced hiring minimums,
Mhm.
because you get the rest of your time through training with them. But I would say if you're anywhere north of 750 hours, really start figuring things out, getting involved, talking to recruiters,
Mhm.
going to pilot fairs or shows, whatever they call
Right. And start looking at
them.
some example resumes like you were talking about.
Yeah,
Um.
and that was nice too. We had one of our resident airline captains come in and give us a little uh, resume workshop. So
Yeah.
that was nice, because I didn't really know what they wanted until I sat through that and was able to kind of curtail it to make it look nice too.
Yeah, and that's good. That I was wondering about that because even just I've worked in the creative field for a while, but applying for a more corporate position,
Mm-hmm.
doing what I'm doing, I had to figure out how to make a resume look like an actual resume, and that
Yeah,
was just, I mean, for the rest of standard life, I don't know anything about a pilot resume.
yeah,
So you got to learn that from someone. So
mm-hmm.
that's good that you got exposed to it.
Yeah.
So you've been going through this journey, and now you did get a job landing. When are you out of here? When's your last day?
I'll say it's gonna be next Thursday, so
Yeah,
like a week after this podcast comes
yeah,
out.
sounds about right. Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, how does that feel? Is that a
you
little?
guys aren't gonna be able to bring me back for a
Yeah,
third time, unfortunately.
no. You say you gotcha. You're ready
um,
to start though, right?
but yeah, it's kind of surreal.
Yeah,
And I'm just excited. I don't want to kind of just want to be enveloped or involved in the moment, and you know
yeah,
while you are making it to an airline, obviously you are still looking ahead to what comes after that, and I can't help but plan myself. But
yeah,
yeah, just to enjoy the moment and enjoy the ride,
yeah,
because that's
man.
why we all ultimately got into it, was just to enjoy the work that we do. And
Hmm.
it's a bonus that the industry is, you know I would say, starting to fairly compensate the pilots. But even when I signed up for ZTA, it was before airlines started getting these massive new contracts.
Hmm.
So I was perfectly okay with going to a regional and making 50 grand a year to fly planes,
Yeah,
as long as it was sustainable,
right.
to be able to live.
Yeah,
That was kind of aspiration for it.
yeah.
So
And now you
it's
maybe you get
just
a
an
little.
added bonus,
Yeah, you get that and then some, it
Yeah,
sounds like. 'Cause I was looking that up the other day. I was like, "How does this work? I need to know what these
yeah.
guys are training
Well,
for."
yeah, the
So,
easiest way to look at like an airline pay scale is look at the hourly rate, just add 3 zeros to the end. And that's roughly what it comes out to.
roughly okay,
All
gotcha.
airlines are different in how they calculate different stuff, but that's the most universal, easy
Yeah,
way
I
to
was
figure
reading
it
that
out.
generally you get paid, like, while the engine's running and,
Yeah.
count your flight hours for the week and
Hmm.
multiply it, but I see what you're saying. That's,
Because there's that too, but then, like, a trip, you may fly a 4 hour trip, but oh, it was at a premium and now it's 8 hours, stuff like that.
yeah,
So
yeah.
that's what I found is usually the most reliable
It's just add the 3
average.
zeros to
Yeah.
the hourly wage,
Yeah.
and that's likely what you might be
Yeah.
getting by the end of the year.
Hmm.
Okay, that's good. I'm gonna put that on the internet.
Yeah, Airline Pilot Central is the website that has most all of them on there
Oh, really?
for
Airline
all the
Pilot Central.
airlines. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, since you've gotten so far into your journey, what do you think has I mean, you told me that when you first started on the last podcast, you had just come back from college because of the way what we were locked down. There we go. We were on quarantine. I don't want to say too many words because they flag that stuff. So,
Yeah.
but you came back home. You were working at Chick-fil-A, and you said,
Yeah.
"I'm just gonna go ahead and pull the trigger. I'm gonna go to
Yeah.
school." What has changed since when you first started here versus you now starting your career? Is there like a mindset shift at all, or I mean, do you feel any different? Would you compare yourself to
Yeah.
your past self at all?
Yeah. I mean, I think if my student pilot self saw me, I'd be like, no freaking way.
Yeah.
Because like standing on the bottom, like, just starting your private pilot training, looking up, I was like, when I would look at my old CFI that I had initially, I was like, how the hell am I ever gonna get to there?
Yeah.
It seems so far away and so daunting.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like it's really one of those things. It's like running a marathon. It's just one foot in front of the other, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, now you look back and you're like, dang.
Yeah, exactly.
And time really flew by too.
Yeah.
But and I will say, going back to your question earlier
Mm.
about something that's maybe not my strongest point too,
Uh-huh.
is uh like I would unhealthily compare myself to other students and other flight instructors, because like even when you're CFI, like everyone's like, oh, how much time you at, how much time you at,
Oh, they think about it like
and
that.
I
It's like a
when someone
race.
went, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, and when someone tell me they got more than me, I'll be like, oh, I'm gonna catch you,
Oh,
I'm gonna
yeah.
get you.
Because you're counting
um
like when they started and things like
yeah.
that too, right?
Yeah, and like comparing yourself with other students in your class. And I will say, like, there's like at a certain level it is healthy in a sense of, people pushing each other to get where you want.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You just don't want to let it like consume you or anything like
Yeah.
that.
Well, it's hard to comparison can be tricky, but if there's
Yeah.
healthy competition, that's good.
Yeah.
That has a positive effect.
Yeah.
But comparing and letting yourself get down on yourself or think differently
Yeah.
about people, I understand that could it's a hard thing to fight there. Uh,
Yeah.
um, I did want to ask you because we're wrapping up here pretty soon. I did want to ask you if you had advice to people who are nearing the end of
Mm,
their well, maybe they're a CFI. That's before that. Maybe they're getting ready to go into CFI.
yeah. It's a big milestone for sure, and
Hmm.
I bet if they're getting pretty close to a check ride, they've been working and studying their butt off
Hmm.
for a while.
Does anything help them land a job as a CFI?
Yeah. So like getting a job as a flight
Hmm.
instructor, definitely. Like teaching is a huge portion of, you know, being a flight instructor,
Yeah.
and they spend a lot of time teaching you different techniques and things like that to help you along the path. And I think one thing that really helped me as a teacher and flight instructor was, just understand, like, you can really easily overcomplicate things. And I've found that, and just like my nature in general, was always find the easiest or most efficient way to do things.
Hmm.
I'm a big smarter, not harder kind of guy.
Hmm.
And so I found once you can like make rapport or understand your student
Mm.
in the context of, what you're trying to teach them and what they're trying to learn, once you can figure out how they tick and how
Hmm.
their brain works, then, you guys will be able to teach and communicate and
Yeah.
interact with each other on a whole different level. Obviously, you're not really gonna have time to do that in a check ride or an interview, but in a check ride or an interview, just be yourself.
Hmm.
Obviously, don't be standoffish.
Yeah.
Usually, the DPE or person who's hiring you or interviewing you is more experienced, more knowledgeable. So all you can do is really show up, with an attitude of I'm here to learn and get better, um, with that mindset, and then just kind of be open and receptive to
Mm.
that feedback.
As the pilot that you are now, what
Yeah.
what are your strengths as a pilot? What makes you shine?
Um, Definitely. And I think over time as a pilot, you'll always get better at this, but
Hmm.
um, stepping into a Piper Archer here, taking off out of Addison and doing a training flight or an exam in the Addison and Dallas area, like my situational awareness from when I first came here as a private pilot
Hmm.
on my first flight to now as a 1500 hours CFI, the level of situational awareness is like mind-blowingly different.
Mm.
Like, from, you can recognize terrain, where airspace limitations are, where traffic is likely to
Hmm.
be, what calls ATC is going to tell you before you even call them.
Mm.
It's like this level of it's it's almost kind of crazy, but like your level of understanding of the area in which you operate is so advanced because of all this experience that you've gained. That's one thing I think has been crazy different.
Yeah.
And something that I don't know if it's a skill or not, but I typically, it helps prevent a lot of disruptions or confusion between you and ATC, especially too if you understand what they want you to do.
Yeah.
That's one thing that I've always been fascinated with too, is like learning more about controllers. And they have their whole far aim book as well
Yeah.
on their standard phraseology, and watching videos of them too. If I ever, for whatever reason, if I ever couldn't fly but could still hold a medical to be a controller, I think I would do it in a heartbeat.
Awesome.
I think it's cool. And
Yeah.
the more you can understand about their job and the more they understand about yours, the better you guys can work together.
Yeah.
Man, I kind of got off
No,
track.
but you said the right thing. I was talking to some of the students yesterday, and they were talking about how they're glad they work at this airport, or they're learning at this airport because they get to practice communications and things like
Yeah.
that. So for you to say, hey, your experience makes you feel more comfortable knowing what's going
Yeah.
on at all times in every
Yeah.
way, your situational awareness,
Yeah.
I think that's definitely a big up.
Yeah, because like literally at this point too, I could be listening to a student asking me a question, like pay attention to what's going on with the airplane and everything, and hearing a call from ATC, even though the student's not listening because he's talking to me, hear that call and transmit it back to ATC, and then go from there, and then teach the student, oh, hey, did you hear that? You just get trained to hear that thrust call.
Yeah, I guess that's what you're looking for before you step out of the school and out of training. So that's good. I'm glad to hear that. We're wrapping up here with Cole. Next month, we are going to be talking a lot more about what we call examining authority. We just talked a lot about student life, and I'm glad you are here to help us do that. Could you tell them a little bit more about what examining authority is before we wrap this up?
Yeah, so essentially examining authority or an EOC is basically like a check ride. Part of the brief or things I tell students when I start an EOC with them is I say, if you've had a check ride before, I'll say it's kind of going to work very similarly. Only differences are I'm not a DPE and I'm not getting paid $1,000 to be here.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
And granted, DPEs earn and deserve that. And maybe I'll be one day. Who knows?
Yeah, right. Are there any possible benefits to us having that?
Yeah, definitely. So, being an EOC instructor and doing EOCs, it's a lot more efficient. I'm an instructor who's readily available and have my set schedule and times where I can do 2 or 3 of these exams in a day. And I feel like it helps students too. They feel more comfortable and less intimidated by us as instructors. They've interacted with us before and know we're not monsters or out to get them. But yeah, essentially, the FAA has granted us the ability, because of our past success and pass rate, that we're authorized to conduct these exams on behalf of the FAA and issue them certificates for ratings. So essentially, you could get to all the way up until your commercial license before ever taking a check ride with an actual DPE, and just makes life a lot easier in terms of scheduling, availability, and I would assume cost as well. But yeah.
Well, that's good. Yeah, so I'm gonna be unpacking that a lot over the next couple of weeks, because we want people to know, how that works at our school, especially one that's our size. And the goal is to make, like you said, everyone available for a check ride and be able to pass through this program at a accelerated speed, since it is called Zero Time to Airline. Again, thanks, Cole, for joining me here on Pilots Say What, where we hear what pilots have to say. I'm sure there's plenty of people out there who do want to hear a little bit more about what Thrust Flight offers. You can go to thrustflight.com. You can subscribe to our podcast here on streaming services and on YouTube, where we post all sorts of content. And we look forward to seeing y'all here with us next time. We'll see you next week.